There is a plant sitting in your home right now. It hangs from a shelf, or trails from a windowsill, or sits forgotten on a desk near a window that doesn't get enough light. You water it sometimes, you ignore it for weeks. It survives anyway. You don't know its history. Nobody told you. And that silence, that specific, deliberate silence, is exactly where this story begins. Because this plant was not always decorative. It was not always background. For thousands of years, it was food. It was medicine. It was survival. And somewhere between the colonial expeditions and the industrial nursery trade, all of that was quietly erased. What was once a system of knowledge became an ornament. Welcome to Ancient Food Files, a channel dedicated to recovering what has been buried, misclassified, or simply forgotten. If this is your first time here, consider subscribing. Not for the numbers, but because this kind of knowledge disappears when no one is keeping watch. Before you continue watching, please check the link I provided in this video's description. That way, you can verify it yourself. Now, let us open the archive. The plant we are discussing is Chlorophytum comosum, known commonly as the spider plant, known in Zulu tradition as Ikili, known in parts of East Africa by names that translate, roughly, to the mother of many, a reference not to sentiment, but to biology. It originates from the coastal and highland regions of southern Africa, from KwaZulu-Natal to the Eastern Cape, from places where the soil is thin, the seasons are unforgiving, and the plants that survive are the ones that have solved problems most organisms never had to face. The Zulu people understood it as both edible and medicinal. The young leaves were eaten. The fleshy roots, thick, white, almost tuberous, were prepared and given to pregnant women. Not as ritual, as nutrition, as something that worked. This was not folklore. This was a knowledge system developed over centuries of careful, intimate observation. To understand why this plant survived everything, you have to understand how it is built. Chlorophytum comosum stores water and nutrients in its roots. Roots that look almost swollen, almost anticipatory, as if the plant evolved expecting to be neglected, expecting drought, expecting collapse. It grows in poor soil, in deep shade, in the kind of conditions that kill most other plants within weeks. And then it reproduces. Not through seeds primarily, but through stolons, long, arching runners that extend outward from the mother plant and produce fully formed offspring at their tips. Each offspring already rooted, already independent, already capable of beginning again. The plant does not wait for favorable conditions. It creates the next generation regardless. This is not resilience in the motivational sense. This is engineering. This is a biological system so stable, so self-renewing, that it has persisted largely unchanged for millions of years. It does not need human attention. That, eventually, became the problem. European botanical expeditions arrived in southern Africa in the late 18th century. By 1794, Chlorophytum comosum had been formally documented and carried back to Europe. It moved quickly through the botanical gardens of Kew, Paris, and Amsterdam. By the mid-1800s, it was a fashionable Victorian houseplant, prized for the visual drama of its hanging offshoots. The knowledge that traveled with it, the nutritional use, the medicinal application, the indigenous name, did not make the journey. What arrived in Europe was an aesthetic object, stripped of context, repackaged for drawing rooms. During the Irish famine of the 1840s, as 1 million people starved and another million fled, fields across Europe sat growing ornamental plants for the wealthy. The spider plant, known to survive in poor soil with minimal water, known to be edible, known to produce abundant offspring, sat in parlor windows. Decorative, mute, its history already beginning to dissolve. This was not conspiracy. It was a simpler, older kind of forgetting. A system that valued ownership over utility, beauty over function, the exotic over the familiar. By the 20th century, the industrial nursery trade had completed the transformation. Chlorophytum comosum was now a product, mass-propagated, sold in plastic pots, marketed for ease of care. The question of what it could do, what it had always done, was not asked. Because the plant that cannot be patented, cannot be owned at the genetic level, cannot be sold as a pharmaceutical or a supplement, is an inconvenient plant. It was unmanageable in the most threatening sense. Anyone could grow it, anyone could propagate it indefinitely from a single specimen. It could not be made scarce. It could not generate dependency. So it became decoration, and its other life was quietly buried. In 1989, NASA published a study, the Clean Air Study, Researchers had been testing common houseplants for their ability to remove volatile organic compounds from enclosed environments: formaldehyde, benzene, carbon monoxide, xylene, compounds that accumulate in sealed buildings, compounds that cause headaches, respiratory damage, long-term organ stress. Chlorophytum comosum was among the most effective plants tested. It absorbed formaldehyde and carbon monoxide with unusual efficiency. It was non-toxic to humans and animals. It required almost no intervention to do its work. The study was not trying to vindicate ancient knowledge, but it did, quietly, without meaning to. What the Zulu people understood through generations of living alongside this plant, that it was beneficial, that it belonged inside human spaces, had now been confirmed in a controlled laboratory environment. The knowledge had not been wrong, it had only been ignored. There is a particular kind of forgetting that happens not to individuals but to communities. When a food becomes associated with poverty, with hardship, with the worst years of a people's memory, the generations that follow reject it, not from ignorance, from memory, from a desire to put certain things behind them. The spider plant, as a food source, carries that weight in many communities. To eat it now would be to remember what it meant to have no other choice, and so it is grown on shelves instead, admired for its trailing offshoots, watered occasionally. The knowledge survives in the roots, but the practice has been set aside, perhaps permanently, perhaps not. The air inside modern buildings is, in many cases, more toxic than the air outside. Sealed architecture, synthetic materials, off-gassing compounds trapped in spaces where humans sleep, work, and breathe for the majority of their lives. The World Health Organization calls it a significant public health concern. The solutions being proposed are largely technological: filtration systems, air quality monitors, pharmaceutical interventions for respiratory conditions that are, at their origin, environmental. Meanwhile, Chlorophytum comosum sits on a shelf, already working, already filtering, already doing, without instruction or incentive, what billions of dollars of research and infrastructure are attempting to replicate. The plant was always prepared for this. It did not need the crisis to arrive to begin adapting. Some things are not lost, they are only waiting. The spider plant does not require validation. It does not require rediscovery. It has been here, in the corners of our homes, in the thin soil of neglected pots, in the trailing offshoots that reach toward floors no one asked them to reach toward. It reproduces without permission. It purifies without acknowledgement. It carries, in its pale fleshy roots, a memory older than the systems that forgot it. The knowledge was never truly buried. It was only placed somewhere inconvenient, somewhere no one thought to look. Nature does not wait for consensus. It does not petition for relevance. It simply continues. And in the quiet corners of your home, on the shelf you pass without looking, it already has. If this kind of recovery matters to you, if you believe that what has been forgotten deserves to be found again, subscribe to Ancient Food Files. Every video is an archive. Every archive is an act of preservation.